at the golf course. At that time, there was no discussion, either publicly or in council's private discussions, about the fact that the management company may already have been negotiating or have even already struck a deal with a third party to provide food and beverage service. Why does that matter? Because when we as a council are being asked to consider extending a contract where we pay money each month to the management company, and for those who weren't here, I'll point out I questioned at the last meeting and didn't get an answer. What is it we got or we're getting for our $6,000 a month to the management company? But in the context of that discussion, I think it would have been important, certainly to me, to know if there was a deal in the making which is going to generate some, as yet, unspecified amount of revenue to the management company, because that stays with the management company for the food and beverage operations that are now being third-partied out. I knew nothing about this. I had no information about it. I do not know, and I'll leave it to my fellow council people to explain whether or not they knew anything of this, but it strikes me as implausible that the deal that was struck and that now has apparently been signed all came together in the period of time since our last council meeting. So whether or not you think that's an important factor, it's clearly something that should have been put into the discussion, and I would have to question if there are other members of this council or other members of our city government who were aware of this and knew that we were voting to extend the management agreement with this new provision allowing the management company to third party out and keep the money, why you would not bring that up for consideration by council.
I'd like to have Nathan from the golf course come up and explain the details of how he got to the management company, please.
Good evening, Council. Following the meeting, I believe it was April the 18th, if I remember correct, was the last meeting. Once the extension was approved, I'm sorry, March, I apologize. March 18th, once that extension was approved, I then, on the following day, met with 3 separate individuals to offer them, ask them if they would be interested in the opportunity to manage the food and beverage concessions at the golf course. I then received 2 proposals from the people that I met with, and following discussions with my superiors at Meadowbrook Golf down in Orlando, Florida, actually Lakeland, Florida now, then a decision was made to enter into an agreement with the vendor. Is that?
Now, Nathan, the vendor is in control of the beverage portion as well? Is it a full turnkey operation for them, food and beverage?
Full turnkey operation, yes, sir.
All right. I don't know if you were here at the time, but there was an issue a couple of years back, or now several years back, about the relationship between the city as the entity which is allowed to get a concessionaire's permit for the sale of liquor, and the management company or runs the operation. Are you familiar, not with the details maybe, but that there was a dispute about that? And my understanding of that, the resolution of that dispute by the ABC was in part that the vendor who actually runs and presumably gets the revenue from the sale of alcoholic beverages cannot be the 100% owner, that, well, let me take it back, that the management company or the city has to have at least some percentage interest in the entity which sells the alcoholic beverages.
Okay. Again, that was prior to my time here.
Right, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot with that, but I'm just curious because, again, first I heard about any of this was tonight, so I certainly haven't seen any agreements between any of the parties here. I would be interested in seeing it, but I wonder, has anyone on council or any of our professionals reviewed those agreements to make sure that the arrangement between our management company and the third-party food and beverage vendor does not once again run afoul of the restriction that was in issue several years back? I don't know if
I
anyone's
think
seen
that
it.
was,
Has
I think
anyone
that was
seen
a
it?
legal question.
Well, no, it's a question, has anyone seen the agreement?
No, I have not seen the agreement, but I think one of the things that,
I'd like to ask you, do we need to see an agreement between our vendor and their vendor?
I don't know that we need to. If we wanted to, I think we'd be entitled to.
Okay.
If you ask the question the other way, I mean, I think that we can ask for
Are
it.
we entitled to it?
I think we're entitled to, yeah.
Okay. Nathan, can
Actually,
you
My recall,
provide
but
Fred
my-
Cerny with the
Yeah.
agreement you
I'll
have
be happy to
between your
provide him
vendor?
with a copy, absolutely.
And Fred, can you make sure it's all in legal order?
Sure.
Okay, then go have a hoagie down there afterwards. I don't care.
thank you, Nathan.
Ann H. Phillips. A few minutes ago, Mr. DeLucre made a statement that was simply amazing and outrageous about what has happened concerning the golf course and the vote that was taken at the last meeting to approve an extension of the existing contract. Well, evidently that is not at all the whole of it. And the part that is missing and being revealed this evening is vital and a key part of that agreement and that vote. And how in the world did this council vote on something when maybe part of you knew about it and the others did not? That's totally wrong. The public certainly had the impression that the only thing that was being done was extending the contract. Mr. DeLucre did question the $6,000 figure and what we were getting for it. Well, evidently what we're getting is a lot less than what we have gotten. Now, I think there are legal concerns here as well as ethical ones. First of all, there is a lease agreement between the management company and the city regarding food and beverage. How does this new arrangement affect that? Does it invalidate it? And what is the relationship concerning the liquor license? 2, the utility. Now it's been split. And the least lucrative part of it is being left evidently to the taxpayers because the money's going to be made possibly, certainly it is in other golf courses, on the food and beverage operation. So this whole thing deserves a thorough public hearing, and it certainly didn't get it. It appears that that was on purpose. That is very unfortunate. But this is a key part of that vote, and it wasn't discussed at all. And members of council didn't know anything about it. The public didn't. There have been rumors around. I've heard those. And I thought, no, this was just an extension of an existing contract. And that is not correct.
Well,
Something's wrong somewhere, and this whole thing needs to be brought out. This should have full public disclosure of what happened and
Mrs.
what is
Phillips.
going on.
could I ask?
Well, may I continue?
No, I just want to know, have you read the extension contract?
I know it was the extension
No, have you
contract.
read
Have
the-
I read it? No.
Okay, so,
Because nobody said there was anything in it but extending the contract.
It
But
was-
everybody on this council knew.
Well, then
we
why
were
didn't you
wait a minute,
tell
wait a minute.
us?
Everybody knew on this council knew that we were giving the permission to the Meadowbrook, F&B, they could actually do it, or they could actually lease it out. We gave them that permission to
That
do
was
that.
not discussed
but
at that
it's-
public
It's in
meeting.
the contract, Mrs. Phillips.
the
That's
contract.
fine, it can be in the
Mr.
contract.
DeLucre
You're
knew it.
assuming that everybody
Everybody knew
goes
it on this
through,
council.
excuse me, Councilman, everybody goes
Mrs.
through the
Phillips.
computer and reads the
Wait a minute,
whole
Mrs.
contract.
Phillips.
That's not true.
Mrs.
Why wouldn't you bring it out?
Hold on, 1 second. And regardless of what you think about this, I just want to make it clear that if you read the contract, it is in the contract, and everybody on council knew that it was in the contract. It's also, has not...
Evidently, everybody didn't know.
Yeah, well,
We knew it
Well,
it was in the
May I?
contract.
And
And
once
another
again,
other thing, Mrs. Phillips,
But,
we did not receive any monies. The taxpayers never received any monies for the food and beverage before. So
no, it was a utility. Is it now still a utility?
the food and beverage, we
Self-sustaining?
never received a dime for before.
well,
We weren't supposed to. We also
Well,
didn't
so
get
what-
paid and any payment in lieu of taxes, which was in the original contract
But
also.
I'm just saying, you're saying that we're left with the golf course. That's what it's been for years.
Yes, but self-sustaining. Now, it's already having trouble being self-sustaining, and if you would reduce it to just the golfing part, it's going to be less and less self-sustaining.
Well, if we were not getting nothing from the
And
food
who
and
pays
beverage
the bill?
before,
The taxpayers.
Whoever, we weren't getting nothing from the food and beverage before, so we're still not getting nothing.
Nobody said we were, sir. It's a part of what
Well, you're
helps to
saying
make
it's
it...
less now. We're getting less.
No, I'm saying
We're
that
paying less.
you will take, it's supposed to be self-sustaining. It no longer is. And so you're taking away the part that could probably produce the more revenue and leaving the taxpayers with the part that's not going to be so productive.
Ms.
We
Phillips,
were
I-
never
But the
getting-
whole point is,
We were never
you
getting any
didn't
money from the
discuss,
food and
sir,
beverage.
you did not discuss this at that meeting. Now, what impression does that leave to the public? That you're hiding something?
Well,
Well, the contract
So
was
I-
on, the contract, I believe, was on the website prior to the meeting. The terms of the contract
Well,
were
why
there.
didn't you mention it? Obviously, that was important.
I don't even know if we
It-
mentioned it or
It
not.
changed the contract. And
It's-
how does it affect the management, the lease between Meadowbrook and the city regarding food and beverage? How does it change this utility as a legal utility?
And I'll
We
let,
we never
ask
got
Mr. Cerny to answer.
And
as
why
the-
wasn't, and how?
Can
are
I
the
answer a
public-
question one at a time, Mrs. Phillips?
Yes.
Can we try and clarify before you draw all your conclusions? Mr. Cerny, does this change the utility setup that the golf course has with the city of Brigantine?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, you've had this management contract in place. It has been renewed a number of times, and the only thing that is different here is that they have the ability to sub out the F&B. I don't know why that would undo everything.
plus we negotiated a lower rent.
Well, you've
Per
done
month.
that, you've done that over a period of years. I believe in 2012, it was at
It was
$9,500 a
like
month,
$10,000, yes.
and that we were paying them.
Right.
And then there was a subsequent extension that took it from 95 down to 75, and this one has now taken it from 75 down to 6,000.
So we
You
saved
will
$1,500
admit,
a month.
gentlemen, that there was no public discussion of this particular part of that vote.
Mrs.
There
Phillips?
was none.
Once again, the contract was there, but I also have to tell you that I don't think it's any secret to anyone that, and Meadowbrook has said this a number of times, they aren't very excited about operating the food and beverage part of that contract. And in fact, my suggestion, as you know, was months ago that we put the food and beverage out to bid because I think it will enhance the golf course operation if it's open more, if it has some different variety, and there is a component there that people can depend on, because the golf course food and beverage is not open enough right now. It's open when there's golf, it's open when there is a special event, and that was a concern that we talked about. It was a concern of mine that we should have put it out a long time ago as a separate entity. This is a contract that has a 30-day clause that the city of Brigantine can get out of that contract in 30 days. One of the things that we want to do, I believe, as a council, is to put the RFP back out again, because Mr. Glavin said that he would do it again. We're going to
free.
put it back out again for free. And if in fact someone comes back with an offer that is in the interest of the taxpayers, that solves the problems that we have identified going forward, that contract will be we'll be out of that contract in 30 days, and a new operator will be in there. So I don't know if you're aware of that part of the contract either, that there is a 30-day clause that we can get out of the contract if in fact we go in a different direction. So I would tell you to read the contract, and then if you have questions, you could ask them after
That's
you've read
right.
it.
The opportunity to ask the questions was at the meeting at which the vote was taken,
Well, you
which
should-
all of this, no, please, don't use that. It's great to have things on the computer. Not everybody reads that, and you did not emphasize that. You didn't mention it at all. That was deceptive, and that does not give a good impression.
Actually,
And we need to know everything.
Well, Ms.
The
Phillips,
public has a right to know.
they absolutely do.
Well, they didn't get that opportunity and that information, and this raises a lot of issues. While I'm up here, how many minutes do I have, Lynn? Well, quickly. Is the city involved in any way with the property across from the lighthouse on the bay next to the Stranding Center? Because
in-
this has been discussed here in the past, and I'm curious as to see what, is the city doing anything concerning that? Pardon me?
The one with the wall around it?
Yes.
Well, I don't know, Mr. Cerny, how much can you disclose about our involvement with the property that we have discussed? Mrs. Phillips, you know that.
Yes, and
Yes.
what would the city be interested in doing with it? And how
Well,
much would it
There was
cost?
an interest for open space, but I'll let Mr. Cerny discuss that if he feels he can.
Well, in terms of the city's interest, that apparently has been expressed. In terms of any position that the city is in right now vis-à-vis the acquisition of that property or vis-à-vis the financing of it, they have been executive session items, and that matter is not totally concluded at this point. There may be a point of conclusion sometime in the next 30 days or so, at which point information would be available, but it's not available right now.
Well, I think the public would like to know, too, for what purpose the city would be interested in acquiring, if that is what the city wants to do. One other thing concerning the budget, and since the hearing is at your next meeting, there appears to be there is a page missing that has appeared in previous budgets, and it's the analysis of compensated absence liability sheet that's not in there for 2015, and I think it should be. So would you look into that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Phillips.
Actually, Mrs. Phillips, if you don't mind, I share your concerns. I understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to, it gives the impression that there wasn't full disclosure. When this issue came up, one of the things that I did look at was that option for, I actually became aware tonight, as many council members did, that it was subleased out. But when that came across and I looked at it, I imagined the possibility was there. And maybe I didn't articulate it well, but I did speak to that issue at the council meeting in my comments, because I thought one of the values of having that mention of the lease was to keep things going. And one of the things that I did mention was that one of the things that was brought to my attention as a way to improve the golf course is by the clubhouse. And that if you can improve that clubhouse, you can attract more people here, which will bring more rounds and more revenue, which will help. So, and I'll tell you this, I apologize if I didn't articulate that well, but that is something that caught my attention, and I did try to bring up and did try to talk about. So it's not that it wasn't put out there, but when I read that, I imagined that the possibility could come about, and I saw the relevance and the connection to what we're trying to do, which is alleviate the burden on the taxpayer. So that's, I'm sorry. But it almost seems like the accusation is that there was a deal in place, and I can't speak for myself, but I feel that the accusation is that I knew of some prior deal that was already in place, which I did not. I did not.
And
Well, Mrs.
Let me-
Phillips.
Let me respond if I-
Mrs. Phillips, how was the public cheated? Oh, okay.
Ms. Phillips, and I stand behind everything I said before. The responses that I've heard to Ms. Phillips' comments were not responses aimed at the core problem. It wasn't a question of members of council not being aware that the sublease language was in there. We, of course, were aware of that. The issue was, it came to us in the context of a proposal to extend the management contract. And we're clapping ourselves on the back because we reduced it from 7,500 to 6,000, 6,000 which still I'm waiting to hear what we get for any 1 cent worth of that 6,000. But in the context where it certainly appears to me, given the time that it takes to bring together a deal of the type that apparently has now been struck, no one that was involved in the discussions in this council knew, I'll assume, or if they did know, they simply chose not to say, that in fact there was a deal about ready to be struck. Had I had that information, I certainly, even though I voted against the management contract for other good reasons, I certainly would have wanted to have a public discussion about what are the financial terms going forward. And it doesn't matter if it's a 30-day kick-out or not. That's not the issue. The issue is because I certainly didn't know. If others knew, they can say they knew or they can say they didn't know. But in the dark, we voted on an extension of a management agreement where we gave a new right to that management company, which I thought was a theoretical right. It's a contractual right that they could exercise somewhere down the line, but in fact, looks like it was just waiting to be realized, that a deal had already been struck. And if anybody on council knew in advance that that was what was going down, that to me is an outrage. You have an obligation, and we have an obligation, to conduct our business in public, and it's not enough ever to say, as the mayor just said, well, yeah, everybody knew that Meadowbrook wanted out of food and beverage. Well, that's nice, but we don't operate based on what everybody knows or what we should know or what maybe we should have read somewhere. We have public meetings so that we publicly discuss every aspect of an issue. That's what a public meeting is. It's not when people have private conversations and private agreements and private knowledge of something that is relevant to a matter that comes before council and they choose not to reveal it. That's what I said. That is the outrage of it, and I stand behind that.
Rick, I disagree with your comments and your level of outrage. Once again, this was fully discussed as a contract in executive session. It was clear to me that it was a possibility that it could be subcontracted. My remarks about the food and beverage operation, which is integral to the operation of the golf course, not only for the day-to-day play, but for tournaments. And once again, I don't want to disparage Meadowbrook's effort in the food and beverage area, but you know, they still will need to coordinate all of those activities and work with the vendor to make sure that the coverage is there. But I do want to remind you that you did vote for the extension of that contract several times without ever voicing of what value is Meadowbrook in the past. But we are moving forward. As I said, we are putting the RFP back out again. It will be an RFP with some minimum standards so that we won't waste a lot of time. If we don't get a number that works for the city of Brigantine, then we would have to move in a different direction. But we are moving forward with that RFP process, and hopefully we'll get a good deal for the city of Brigantine as a result of that.
Phil, I'd just like to say one thing about the finances. $7,500 we were paying Meadowbrook before, and they had the food and beverage. We didn't, as the taxpayers or anybody else, did not receive any monies for the food and beverage. If they did a party, they made $3,000, they made $3,000. We didn't get nothing out of that. So let's make it perfectly clear that when we negotiated the contract from $7,500 to $6,000, the city of Brigantine gained $1,500 a month. Plus, we didn't lose anything on the food and beverage. That was their end of the deal. They could go out and have the food and beverage contracted out, whatever they wanted to do at that particular time. I know the vendor they got. I think it's an outstanding vendor. You know, I guess it's bad news it's a Brigantine vendor. You know, to some people, I think it's great news. I think people will come to the golf links because of that vendor's there. And I think there's many more opportunities now. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to turn this thing around. So every 2 minutes, we can't sit there and say, hey, you know, you only saved us $1,500, but you gave away the food and beverage. We never had the food and beverage. We haven't had that in years. So there was no income to the city of Brigantine. So,
Mrs. Phillips, we're not in the public portion.
well, it was never losing the food and beverage profit to the city. We never received it before. We still don't receive it. We negotiated our contract from $7,500 to $6,000. We saved the taxpayers $1,500 a month. Bottom line. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?